You know that curved screen on your phone or your smartwatch? We see them, we touch them every single day. But the story of how they're actually made, well, that's a whole other level of incredible engineering. So let's get into it.
For the longest time, screens were stuck. The very thing you needed to build a display on, glass, was also its biggest weakness. Sure, glass is clear and stable, which is perfect for building tiny little transistors on. But as we all know way too well, it's also flat, it's rigid, and it absolutely loves to shatter. And that was the roadblock.
So that brings us to the big question, right? If screens have to be built on glass, how in the world do we get these incredible, curved, even foldable displays? How did engineers get around this glass problem? Well, it turns out they didn't just solve one problem. They had to solve three absolutely massive ones.
To really get the magic here, you have to understand this one key idea. The goal was never to make glass bendy. No, the real trick was figuring out how to build a screen that didn't need a permanent glass foundation to begin with. This right here lays out the whole challenge. A normal rigid screen has a glass foundation on the bottom and a glass lid on top to protect everything. To go flexible, you've got to replace both. The foundation becomes plastic, and that protective lid becomes this impossibly thin film. And swapping each of those out, yeah, that was a huge engineering puzzle.
So let's tackle that first puzzle, the plastic foundation. See, the factories that make these things are filled with super hot furnaces and equipment designed for these huge, heavy sheets of glass. You can't just stick a flimsy piece of plastic in there. It would melt into a gooey mess in seconds. So, how do you build on plastic in a factory that's made for glass?
The solution is it's brilliant. And this analogy is perfect. You don't get rid of the glass, at least not at first. You use it as a temporary carrier. That's your heavy stone tray. It can handle all the heat of the oven while you bake your delicate pastry, our flexible display, right on top of it. The process is just genius. You start with a regular sheet of glass. Then you coat it with this special liquid plastic called polyamide. You run it through a super hot furnace, and that liquid bakes into a solid, paper-thin plastic film. And that film, that becomes the new foundation for all the sensitive electronics. And this is exactly why they need that special plastic. The process of making the transistors requires crazy high temperatures. We're talking over 450 degrees Celsius. That's hotter than your oven at home can even go. Any normal plastic would just be a puddle, but this special polyamide film, it can take the heat, all while sitting on its trusty glass carrier. Okay, so foundation solved. But now we get to the second problem, and honestly, this one might be even harder. We can't use a thick glass lid for protection anymore. We need something that's clear, flexible, and ridiculously good at keeping oxygen and water out. Why? Because the organic materials in OLEDs are, well, they're divas. They are so sensitive. And this chart really shows you just how sensitive they are. Just look at these numbers. An LCD screen needs about 100 times better protection from moisture than your standard electronics. But an OLED screen, it needs 1,000,000 times better protection. That means you need a seal that is practically perfect. And the reason is, even one tiny microscopic little hole in that protective barrier is enough to let in moisture, create a dead pixel, and that black spot will just spread until it kills the entire screen. The margin for error is, well, it's pretty much zero.
The solution to this is a technology called thin film encapsulation, or TFE. Instead of trying to make one perfect thick layer, it's a stack of many super thin layers of different materials, each one just a few molecules thick.
The best way to picture this is like a microscopic lasagna. Seriously, you lay down a hard, inorganic layer. It's a great barrier, but it might have tiny little pinholes. So on top of that, you add a soft, organic layer. Now, if a water molecule gets through a pinhole in that first hard layer, it hits the soft layer and has to travel all the way sideways to find another pinhole in the next hard layer. By stacking these up, you create what engineers call a tortuous path. It's so long and winding that basically no moisture can ever make it all the way through to the OLEDs. Okay, so we've built our flexible display on the glass carrier and we've protected it with our microscopic lasagna shield. Now for the grand finale, the most dramatic part. Actually getting that finished, crazy thin display off the glass without shattering it into 1,000,000 pieces. This process is called laser liftoff, and it is basically real-life magic. A super powerful laser is aimed right through the back of the glass. Now the glass is clear, so the laser beam just passes right through it. But the second it hits that amber-colored plastic film,
Bam! All of that energy gets absorbed right at that tiny little meeting point. The bond is instantly vaporized, and the flexible display just peels away clean as a whistle.
And the secret key, the magic password for this whole operation, is this number, a 308 nanometer wavelength laser. It's the absolute perfect wavelength of light that the plastic absorbs like a sponge, but the delicate electronics built right on top, they don't feel a thing. It's this final, surgical step that finally sets the flexible screen free.
So, those three breakthroughs, the temporary glass carrier, the microscopic shield, and the laser liftoff, that's how we got the curved screens we have today. But you know, engineers, they're never satisfied. They're already on to the next frontier, moving from screens that are just bent once in a factory to screens that you can fold and unfold thousands and thousands of times. And this challenge is a whole other beast. A bendable display just has to hold one shape its whole life. A foldable display has to survive being opened and shut more than 200,000 times. That creates an insane amount of stress right on the fold line every single time you move it. It requires completely new materials. Pretty much every single component has to be reinvented. The top layer needs a new kind of plastic that's somehow super hard and scratch-resistant, but also flexible enough to fold. The polarizer inside has to get way thinner to handle the stress. Even the touch sensor, which usually uses this brittle stuff called ITO, has to be replaced with new, flexible materials like silver nanowires. And that just leaves us with this final thought. In just a handful of years, we've gone from rigid glass to curved plastic to actual folding devices. It's just an incredible pace of innovation. So, what's next? Are we going to have phones that unroll like a scroll? Or screens that can stretch like fabric? The challenges seem huge, but then again, if the past has taught us anything, you can bet engineers are already working on it right now.